Hello, and welcome back to the Health Data Ethics Podcast. I'm your host, Jenny Owens, and today I wanted to dig into a story that's not about healthcare AI, but can function as a forecast for where healthcare AI laws, lawsuits, and court cases might be going. This was interesting to me for two reasons. One, I'm a mega dork who loves to follow AI in the news, but two, this would give me an opportunity to talk to my favorite person about one of our favorite topics of conversation. Brad, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey y'all. Long-time listener, first-time caller. My name's Brad Owens. I am Jenny's lovely husband. Hopefully she'll say the same thing about me. The reason that we wanted to talk about this is we found ourselves talking about it anyway in our daily life because I come from over 2 decades in the recruiting and hiring space, and most recently in the recruiting and hiring technology space, specifically workforce applications and AI. So when we were talking about it at home, we were like, this needs to be a podcast episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And so here we are to bring you the breakdown, Brad's take, my take, and a bunch of opinions and questions about where this case might go. Because I got to be honest, we don't really agree on 100% of these. We're coming at this from slightly different angles. And I think the tension in these viewpoints is going to give rise to some really interesting discussion. So rather than being coy, let me just tee this up. Why this case was in the news this week was that a federal court just authorized an opt-in notice in a pretty large employment discrimination collective action in U.S. history. So the defendant is not a startup. It is Workday. That is a company that serves more than 65% of the Fortune 500. I got to be honest, I have worked for companies that have used Workday. Brad, I'm sure you have worked with Workday companies.
1,000,000%.
And so the crux of the case is this, that Workday's AI-powered hiring tool screened people out based on protected characteristics, age, race, or disability, without a human ever weighing in. So the case as I am reading it basically says that Workday has used their technology to promote a hiring environment in which people in protected classes are receiving fewer opportunities to pursue employment. Brad, is that how you're reading the case, or do you have a different take?
No, you're right on. The most important part of this and what got us start talking about this is the federal court.
So let me back up for a second and talk about the actual case and then talk about the expansion of class action.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So in the first case, I want to talk about the actual case. So the case is called Mobley versus Workday, and it was filed in federal court in California in 2023. Derek Mobley, the plaintiff, he is a Black man over 40, and he says that he applied to more than 100 jobs at companies that were using Workday's AI-based hiring tools over the course of 7 years, and he was rejected every single time. This is interesting to me for a couple of reasons. One is that I'm very interested in issues of AI ethics, but two, hiring actually has an interesting rule for how you demonstrate discrimination. Brad, we did research on this. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So in the actual hiring space, and just full transparency, I was a recruiter for a long time using tools for recruiting before AI was a thing in recruiting tools. I've helped develop tools that have AI in them that may or may not make hiring decisions. They can't anymore, so they don't. So here's where this case started blowing up and why people are like, yeah, me too. The evidence that he cited in this case was that it wasn't just a feeling. I don't feel like I'm getting rejected from these hundreds of jobs. I actually am, and I tested it because I could prove that my resume was being rejected at a speed with which there's no possible way a human was involved. So he applied overnight and got rejected at 2 a.m. He applied to a job and got rejected in 30 minutes. Now, he claimed that this, and still continues to claim, this isn't a thing that's over, that this is an algorithm that's doing this. Maybe, maybe not. And from my standpoint on the technology side, look, hiring is broken across the board. We'll start there. It's broken. If I can use AI to tweak my resume so that an AI can screen it, we're just essentially hiring robots. We're not doing anything to hiring individuals. I don't think resumes are the right thing. I don't think these hiring tools are the right thing. I think there's a lot better ways that we can use the technology that we have to be able to improve the hiring process. So we'll start there. Now, in the tools that actually exist, a lot of the times, in a lot of the applications that you do online, they are set up with a first round screening. A first round screening is basically just check the box. Do you have this? Do you not? Once people started getting wise to the fact that, oh, if I check that I don't, I'm going to get auto rejected, they immediately say, yeah, I've got all those things, no problem. And there are some technologies out there that will sense this and kind of throw you off the scent by giving you false questions to answer. And then they'll just know if you're going straight through and checking yes, 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 yes. So it could be that he applied to some jobs that had some of those auto things, because if you apply to a job that needs Java experience and you come in never having moved out of COBOL or whatever, they're going to immediately reject you. They just will. You're not a good possible fit for that job. So there could have been some kind of algorithm that was at play here, but it's also possible that a lot of the applications that he was putting out there just had these standard first round screeners on.
So one of the things that I talk about a lot in my daily work, and you get to hear me talk about a lot in my daily work, is this idea of a bias test. So generally speaking, if you're looking at a deterministic predictive algorithm, we want to take that predictive algorithm and we want to bump it up against a table one or a demographic table. And we want to see, how does this algorithm perform for these various demographic classes of people, for male versus female, for people who identify as Black versus people who identify as white or Hispanic or non-Hispanic. And that's one of the ways that you can demonstrate whether a medical algorithm is exhibiting bias or not, even if you leave the demographics out of the way you train it. So that there's two parts here, and I want to kind of pick them apart. One is that I don't believe anybody is saying that Workday deliberately trained this to discriminate. The question is whether the tool is exacerbating discrimination or whether it's displaying discriminative characteristics regardless of its initial intent. And then secondly, the hiring world actually has a bias assessment or a guidance, right? A rule of thumb. Is it the 4/5 rule or is it the 80% rule?
Yeah, so that you're referring to that EEOC rule.
Yeah.
So the EEOC rule says that if any potential hiring practice makes it such that 20% of the population could be deemed as having less chance or less opportunity than the other 80%, then it is a biased hiring potentially situation.
Yeah, which is interesting because it's not law, right? But the guidance does seem to suggest some shared responsibility between the humans running the hiring process and the technology assisting the hiring process in trying to keep our bias, as mitigated as possible. Humans are going to be humans, and hiring, like healthcare, is terrifically complicated, nuanced, and is practiced by imperfect people doing their best.
So this might be a good time to kind of tell everyone what Workday's defense really is here.
Yeah, let's talk about this.
So what Workday is saying through all of this, it's a familiar argument if you've been in this space for any point in time. And I honestly, I have these conversations with both our customers and people that I'm helping implement AI into constantly. The technology stance says we don't make hiring decisions. Our customers make that final decision. We shouldn't be liable here because it was these companies that is saying that they're not hiring those people. We just offer up suggestions. Now, people have been able to stand on that from a technology perspective for a little while. But this judge, Rita Lynn, kind of threw everything onto the bus and just exploded everything by saying that can bias laws apply to third-party software vendors whose tools materially would shape those hiring outcomes, even if the final click belongs to the employer.
So let me put a hypothetical filter on this situation, and you tell me whether this resonates or not. Let's say we're running back the clock to the old days of the big signs in the window that say no Irish need apply, right? And in this situation, we have a helpful filter that is just getting rid of all the Irish folks right away. We're not going to hire them anyway. Why does it matter? And now we're presenting those non-Irish candidates. Who is responsible here? Is it the person who is helpfully only hiring non-Irish people? Or is it the filter that's not like, this seems to be a fundamental human right, the right to seek employment. Maybe I shouldn't be baking this into my algorithm.
Right. So the have to come down to who ultimately bears the responsibility.
Yeah.
And I think the way that this lawsuit is trending is going to be more of a shared responsibility for everyone of human in the loop and technology, or human on the loop, whatever you want to call it, all the same thing. Everyone kind of shares in making this a better, more equal hiring process. So as part of this for me and how I treat any potentially autonomous technology, any AI technology, any just automation driven piece of technology, whenever we're helping customers roll this out, we always bring it back to this idea of a digital employee. If this is something that's actually going to do work for you, you have to manage it and train it such that it is an actual employee. So in the case of all of these potential hiring decisions or suggestions that Workday might be making, you should have someone watching over those decisions and have a understanding of what biases could be inherent in the system. If your technology is not doing what frankly its job should be, of suggesting what bias could potentially be in, even right down to the job description that you're writing, it's not doing its job to help you. However, anyone coming from HR, you get this drilled into your head. All of us have to take these compliance trainings once a year anyway. We get it drilled into our head. The technology doesn't. It's up to us as the individuals of the humans in the loop to treat this as if it were a brand new HR employee and to train it up and to watch over what it's doing. I think it does kind of go to more of the company's fault than the technology's fault, but I'm not saying that the technology is infallible.
So a couple of interesting points. One is that there are actually some areas that want to put in place regulatory requirements to do the kind of auditing and monitoring that you've just described. So you said any company that wants to do this responsibly is going to be checking and training their technology to make sure, just like you would do a human being, right? You got to take the module every year that says you can't fire people over 40 just because they're old. So now you got to train your technology that. New York City actually has required this since 2023. They do annual bias audits of automated employment decision tools, and they require that those audit summaries be posted publicly. So I'm going to go look for that after this podcast because that seems like something really fun to look at. Obviously, New York City, a different regulatory environment than most of the places where we're working. But I also wanted to point out that the EEOC seems to be interested in making a point of this. So there was another case in 2023 where the EEOC actually settled an AI hiring discrimination lawsuit against a tutoring group, which was accused of automatically rejecting older applicants. So they got fined. They had to do corrective measures. I remember talking about this. And so although there isn't a federal law, we're starting to see individual jurisdictions be interested in regulating this, and the EEOC have kind of an appetite for putting this in the courts. So the interesting thing that happened early this year was that this turned from an individual suit against Workday into a potential class action suit. So there is a website open. If you feel like you have personally suffered at the hands of Workday, you can go ahead and put your name in there and say, yeah, absolutely, sign me up. And I'm really interested in your take on this because the judge definitely has clearly she's made it clear where her position is, right? Because this motion got placed before them and Workday basically said, it's a lot of people. I don't think we should do that. And can I just give Judge Lynn's actual quote because I thought it was so great. She says, if the collective is in the hundreds of millions of people, as Workday speculates, that is because Workday has been plausibly accused of discriminating against a broad swath of applicants. Allegedly widespread discrimination is not a basis for denying notice.
Right. It's too big. We can't look at it. That's a problem.
It's a problem. Yeah.
We need to look at that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I get it. I mean, scale is not a defense. The harm is the thing that we're trying to mitigate. And yeah, I thought that was a interesting way to put that on Workday's side. Probably would want to take that one back. You can't do that. So yeah, they opened it up. Anyone who feels like that they've been discriminated against can go into this lawsuit. Now, the question for me that keeps coming to mind is, how in the world are we ever going to go back to the individual organizations that use this to be able to put this together?
Think about the discovery.
Yeah,
truly, honestly, just think about, let's take an individual and say that they've applied to, maybe 30 or 40 different organizations over the course of their career for maybe even 50 different positions, right? Because sometimes you want to go to a particular place. And now for each one of those, you have to go back and I don't know how long the time window is on this, but you have to basically say, what was Workday running at the time? What was implemented at this company at the time? What were they using? What did they know? When did they the discovery on this is going to be like a technological feat. And my hat is off to the legal teams who are doing this sort of work.
Poor Workday. This was even something that Workday acquired. This wasn't their thing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so they are just in a ton of hot water and they kind of acquired this problem. It wasn't their jam to begin with.
But what's interesting is I don't necessarily think it's decided. Like if you join this class action suit, this doesn't feel like a slam dunk to me. You were talking earlier about the division of responsibility and about how Workday couches these tools very carefully and saying essentially, You've heard me talk about human in the loop design, right? Workday is going to serve you information, but there is a human being who bears the responsibility for the decision making. And
Yeah.
this, I think, is going to be really interesting to see how the courts and how the court of public opinion picks apart what the technology does versus what a human responsibility might be. And I honestly don't know where this will fall in the end.
But this isn't the thing that got me heated when we earlier started talking about this and we're like, this needs to be a podcast. So hold on, everybody. A little bit of education here in how recruiting software has worked since I've been in this game for the past 2 decades. Every single applicant tracking system on the market, every single one, will have the ability to compare resume to job with the limited amount of context that everyone likes to feed their technology. The only thing that these recruiting technologies have had for the longest time is, here is my job description, here is my resume. They keyword match on that. The more keywords you have in there, the higher you're going to get on the list. Every single applicant tracking system since I have worked on it, it has worked that way. Now, it's not just getting you higher on the list, ranking, it's also giving you a percentage match. They call it a match score in every single applicant tracking system. Just because now we've opened this up to the world of AI doesn't mean that this is a new problem. This has been ongoing for a long time. Because we are now getting into potential autonomous decision making, that is where we're getting the issue. So if we start thinking about this particular lawsuit as a where was the decision made, then it makes sense. Because the technology itself hasn't really changed all that much. The decision point is what has changed.
Okay, this is interesting. And this is where it sort of moves away from the situation that I often think of in healthcare, is where you've designed a system to be human in the loop, and then you implement it in a way that effectively removes the human from that loop. And so I think that the question here is exactly that, where is the decision point? And where is it really?
Right. And so the recruiting industry is filled with fresh out of college, brand new graduates that want to sit there and just absolutely grind. The life of a recruiter is, I'm going to blow the lid off of everyone that's ever tried to get a job and help you understand why it's so hard. The life of a recruiter is trying to go through thousands of similarly ranked and quite carbon copy clones of each other resumes for the exact same job all day. You are looking for the fastest possible way to help you not have to go through these thousands of resumes. So if along comes a technology like Workday that now has a supposedly better matching algorithm, they are going to jump all over. It's just what they're going to want to use to help make their life and their work easier. I'm not saying it's right, but I'm saying that's what this industry is up against. So it doesn't really surprise me that there would be more decisions made because of a technology that got put in place. It's possible.
Your comment about the matching technology reminds me of the time period where I was getting a lot of offers to sell my psychiatry practice.
Because of?
Some system somewhere has my name on a list of physicians, and apparently I run a psychiatry practice. So I'll either get offered psychiatry positions, or I'll get offered, chances to buy, like to sell my practice, which is, I feel terrible about it because it is a massive waste of everybody's time. But it does make me feel slightly better to know that perhaps it is not a human being frantically typing out these emails.
Nope. Most of the time it's not. In today's world, like, there are so many pieces of technology between you and getting your resume seen. Like, because of this, everyone is all mostly up in arms in the industry of people who are applying for jobs thinking, oh, I got discriminated by a bot and by an agent. It's possible that a score was placed next to your resume because of a bot or an agent, but I can stake my reputation on it that 90% of the time, a human's still looking at it and still click the reject applicant button.
I mean, that's fair. I do want to draw a parallel here, though, because you remember that 2019 science paper with the risk prediction algorithm that I talk about all the time?
Okay.
I guarantee you do remember this because I never shut up about it. Yeah.
I'm wondering how these align.
So there was a health system that was using a risk prediction algorithm that was looking at which patients would benefit from being entered into an HCC program. So a coordinated care program for people who are dealing with multiple comorbid conditions, chronic conditions, diabetes, high blood pressure, that kind of thing. I believe they did not include demographics in this. So they were doing their best to be like good citizens and to be, completely blind to the people. However, when they looked at the output of that, they found that the Black patients were much sicker and the white patients were much healthier. Black patients had on average one or two more comorbid conditions than the white folks, and it's because their output was the estimated cost of care for the next 12 months. In this health system, we had Black folks who were going on dialysis and who were using the ED for care versus white folks who were going into ambulatory appointments. And so even though they started out with the best of intentions, the tool that they used ended up crystallizing bias that was already there in ways that they did not want. And so when you say it's just a score placed by somebody's name, I start to think, okay, yeah, but like going back to my Monty Python meme, right? Like come and see the bias inherent in the system. Do we know that that score was generated in a completely objective way? Of course it wasn't. Is it objective enough? And I think this case is going to actually give us some good information to try to figure that out.
I mean, this is why the EU AI laws limit all of the AI use in anything that touches a hiring thing. It's a high risk category on purpose.
Yeah. I mean, and just because this sounds like we're making a really big deal out of it, and I understand that your ability to access healthcare is one thing, but your ability to seek employment, your ability to attain education, these are also human rights that are protected. And so this truly is tremendously important, and it reverberates all the way through all sorts of sectors. I could talk about this for a long time.
We should probably bring this back to value for your listeners.
Let's bring this home. So I think from my standpoint, the button that I want to put on this is there's no real action and there's no real takeaway for health systems in this right now, unless you happen to use this Workday tool, in which case be aware that some of your employees or some of your applicants may be represented in this suit. And so, let's be prepared for those depositions. But also, where I would like to focus our attention is let us view this as a forecast for where broad class action AI lawsuits can go. Because this is going to be tremendously revealing, not only of what the legal system thinks, but also of what public opinion thinks. Because every single one of those people named in that lawsuit is going to be a patient somewhere someday. Will they trust the AI? Will they want to use it? So that's my takeaway. Let's keep an eye on what this does, both in the law and in private. Brad, what's your final thought?
I will echo that because if this guidance is to hold true, they are setting the precedent that an employer will be held liable for the actions or inactions of an outside vendor who designs or administers some type of decision-making tool on its behalf. So if you can't rely on the vendor's assessment that the tool is actually not making a disparate impact, that's the exact same thing that could happen to healthcare. So if you are one of those procurers of technology, you may want to make sure you're doing your own due diligence and not trusting a technology because we didn't do it, our technology did. Doesn't seem like it's going to fly.
Yeah. There's a limit to the amount of liability you can shuffle off. There just is.
We're going to see some interesting things come out of this. I know that this is just a hiring type AI thing. This sort of parallel that we can drive to any industry, this is going to blow open a lot of doors for sure.
All right. Thank you so much for agreeing to enshrine our weekend conversation for the record.
Sorry, everybody. This is not just podcast conversation. We do this all the time.
I'm really glad to have had a chance to share this with you because this is one of those things that really hits in the sweet spot for both of us.
Yeah, it's really cool to have a crossover. So thanks for having me to
thanks so much
at least give 2 cents on this.
For those of you who want more Health Data Ethics podcast, you can find me on YouTube and on Spotify. You can also follow me on LinkedIn. I usually post these episodes there once a week. Brad, where can people find you?
BradOwens.com. It's the easiest way to keep track of all of the crazy things that I'm involved in.
Yep. If you've got questions, if you want to leave a message for either one of us, drop me a comment below. I would absolutely love to hear from you. And if you want more Owens household AI discussions, let me know that too, because this was really fun to do.
I'll sign on for at least one.